Okay. So we already have done the chapter. The reading part is over, but still we need to talk about the changing cultural traditions, and many students are new to the platform. So after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, लिखने की जरूरत भी नहीं है. Roman Empire, many of the towns that had been political and cultural centers in Italy fell into the ruins. They were no more. Okay, important cities were no more, which were very important during the time of the Roman Empire. And there was no strong political figure, there was no strong political ruler. So the Pope of the Rome was not considered as important. So that was the fall of Rome, we can say in the other words. And in Western Europe, there was a reshaping of the feudal system. I have explained you a lot about the feudalism and the three orders. Then that was unified under the Latin Church, and Eastern Europe under the Byzantine Empire, while Islam was creating a common civilization for the West. So there were basically two religions, Christianity and Islam. In Western Europe, a new kind of culture was developing, and in Eastern Europe, a different kind of culture and the Byzantine Empire was coming up, while in rest of the places, Islam was spreading. On the other side, the Mongols opened up trade with China via the Silk Route, and as trade with Western European countries also increased. So if we talk about after the Western world, you come towards the Gulf, you come towards the China and the Mongolian Empire and the Mongol. Then Mongols had very close connections with the China, and they entered slowly towards the Asian, South Asian parts. At the same time, Italian towns played a central role. They no longer saw themselves as a part of the powerful empire, but as independent city-states. Two of these, Florence and Venice, were republics, and many others were ruled by the princes. So small states were there, and a very big empire was not visible at that time. One of the most vibrant cities were Genoa and Venice. They were important because most of the cultural activities were taken place there. They were different from the other parts of the Europe, and when these towns were ruled by military despots, military despots means these were the autocratic rulers. The pride fell by the town people in being citizen did not weaken. So this is the way how a new culture was developing throughout. The next slide, beta. This is known as the revival of the Italian cities. Now, when we talk about a change, there was a great change in the culture, in the civilization at that time, and that was the time when humanism developed. A humanistic view, philosophers developed a humanistic view, and they said that we need to understand, we need to think about the human beings, and they have to be treated humanly. They are different from the animals, so they have to be treated humanly. And that was the time when humanistic attitude was developed. That was the time when literacy is spreaded, and many learning centers, schools, colleges, universities, the concept of universities came into existence. The earliest universities in Europe had been set up in Italian towns, because Italy was the center of the development of new culture. The universities of Padua and the Bologna had been centers of the legal studies from the 11th century. So the commerce being the chief activity in the city, there was an increasing demand for lawyers and notaries to write and interpret rules, written agreements without which trade on a large scale was not at all possible. So why do we talk about the legal terms? Why do we talk about the legal things? Because if there is a society, society has to be run on some guidelines. Society has to be run on some rules and regulations. If the rules and regulations are not there, then we cannot expect a systematic society. There will be a chaos. पूरी सोसाइटी के अंदर बहुत क्योस होगा, कुछ भी क्लियर नहीं होगा, लोग आपस में लड़ेंगे झगड़ेंगे, एक ही बात के लिए, एक ही चीज के लिए बहुत झगड़े होंगे. So it is very important to have rules and regulations in the society. When rules and regulations are there, there should be some people, those who guide. It is not that the lawyers are only for fighting or for some conflicts. Lawyers are there to guide you. Okay, so for the common people, for the common man, it was very important to have the lawyers in the society to guide the people. Okay, so by the early 15th century, the term humanist was used for masters who taught grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, and moral philosophy. So these were the people. Basically, you can say that in the society, the teachers were there, teachers of different subjects, the different faculties were there, those who taught different subjects, and those who guided the people, and a humanist view in the society came into existence. मनुष्य, हम मनुष्य हैं, हम मनुष्य हैं, इसलिए हमें मनुष्य के जैसे, मानव के जैसे ट्रीट किया जाए. वी शुड बी ट्रीटेड सिंपैथेटिकली. इट इज नॉट दैट आज की सोसाइटी का कॉन्सेप्ट है कि जानवर भी, उनमें जान है तो उनको भी हम बहुत अच्छी तरह से ट्रीट करें. हम खाली मनुष्य हैं इसलिए हमारे साथ अच्छा ट्रीटमेंट हो, जरूरी नहीं है. जानवरों के साथ भी अच्छा ट्रीटमेंट हो, पौधों के साथ भी अच्छा ट्रीटमेंट हो, जिसमें जान है. दोज हु हैव लाइफ, दे शुड बी ट्रीटेड properly. So that was the time, because when we have already read about the three orders, जहाँ पर तीन orders थे, जहाँ पर जो last category of the society थी, उनके साथ तो human behavior नहीं होता था. They were treated like animals. Slaves were there. You have already read. So it is very, very clear, when slavery was there, when slaves were there, so the humans were not treated so well. So that was the demand of the intellectuals of the society. The Latin word humanitas, from which humanities was derived, had been used many centuries ago by Cicero, a contemporary of Julius Caesar, to mean culture. So we human beings were developing the culture. So the concept of humanities, the concept of humanities started. You are the student of humanities. What does this mean? People, those who are having the humanist view, they are having empathy for the human beings. They have a sympathy for the human beings. They have a view that human beings should be treated in such a way that they should be treated in such a way that it should reflect that we are all human beings. Till the end of the 13th century, the city had not made a mark as a center of trade or of learning, but things change in the 15th century. A city is known by its great citizens as by its wealth. So this is the way how the humanistic way or the humanistic philosophy developed, and these cities for which we were talking about, these were the University of Padua and Bologna were the centers of studies, and new cities developed in such a way that they became the centers of learning. Which cities are we talking about? You have heard in the first slide, the city of Florence, the city of Rome, these cities became the centers of learning, the centers of development of culture. At the same time, the term Renaissance man is often used to describe a person with many interests and skills, because many individuals who became well known of this time were pure were people of many parts. That means they were the people, those who were talking about the humanistic view. Though these were the people, those who were talking about the humanistic attitude towards the human beings. These were the people, those who were talking about equality for the human beings. These were the people, those who were talking that human beings should be treated empathetically. Empathetically means you put yourself in the other shoe. जैसा आप दूसरे के साथ बिहेवियर कर रहे हैं, यदि आपके साथ वैसा बिहेवियर होगा तो आपको कैसा लगेगा. So this was the attitude. Next. Yes, the humanist view of history. Now we are talking about the development of the humanist view. The next point, the next subheading tells you the humanist view of history. अब history के अंदर humanist view का क्या role है? ठीक है, जिस समय के हम इतिहास का अध्ययन कर रहे हैं, जबकि पुरानी परंपराएं जो थी वो खत्म हो रही थी, डार्क एज जो था, एक बहुत समय, एक लंबा समय था जबकि बहुत डेवलपमेंट्स नहीं हुए थे. That time is known as the dark ages. The Western historians have given this particular time as the dark ages. So in the Middle Ages, they argued that the church had such complete control over men's minds that all the learning of the Greeks and Romans had been blotted out. The humanists used the word modern for the period from the 15th century. तो 14वीं शताब्दी तक का जो काल था, 6वीं शताब्दी से लेकर 14वीं शताब्दी के काल को डार्क एजेस के नाम से जाना गया है. क्यों जाना गया है? Because that was the time when much of development are not visible, are not seen, are not noted. And after in the middle of the 14th century only, new concepts and new intellectual class developed, which is known as the bourgeois class. आपने 1789 की फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन पढ़ी है, उसमें एक बुर्जुआ क्लास होती थी, बोर्जुइज क्लास हुआ करती थी सोसाइटी के अंदर, हम जिसको कि आज की डेट में अपर मिडिल क्लास का नाम देते हैं. Those people were very educated people, those people were philosophers, those people were thinkers, and those thinkers gave a thought in the society ki why human beings are treated this way. Though there was no concept at that time that there are some human rights also, that was not the concept, but this was the beginning when they talk about the humanist view. So recently historians questioned this division. With more research being done, scholars are increasingly reluctant to make sharp divisions between the centuries in terms of being culturally vibrant or otherwise. So it seems very unfair to label any period as the dark ages, but still, when there is no development, when there is no development in the field of culture, in the field of philosophy, in the field of education, that time is known as the time of dark ages, when there is no change. But after that, that period, after the 14th century, when we see that humanist thought were coming into existence, that was the restoration of the true civilization of the human beings after centuries of darkness. For they believed that a dark age had set in after the collapse of the Roman Empire. Following them, later scholars unquestioningly assumed that a new age had begun in Europe from the 14th century onwards. The term Middle Ages, middle period, was used for the millennium after the fall of the Roman Empire. So the fall of the Roman Empire, because Roman Empire was one of the greatest empire in the European history. So this period is known as the greatest period in the history. Okay, so after this, new revival came into existence when we see the humanist view, when we see the opening of the universities, when we see a new thought, and that time onwards we say that the Renaissance came. रेनेसा मीन्स पुनर्जागरण, पुनर्जागरण आ गया था, मनुष्य ने नए प्रकार से सोचना शुरू कर दिया था। तो जागरण तो था, लेकिन हम बहुत समय के लिए सो चुके थे। एंशिएंट हिस्ट्री में बहुत सारी चीजें बहुत अच्छी दिखाई पड़ती हैं, बट मिडिल एजेस there was a period of 500-600 years when there was no change in the culture and the traditions. The same culture and traditions were followed. So because of that, it is called as the dark ages. Many historians say this is wrong to say, but of course the new philosophers, the new thought, school of thought, and the new historians say no, that was the dark age, we say, because there was no development and the same kind of traditions were continuing for a long time. Okay, so after that, now revival came. When revival came, that is known as the time of Renaissance. नई सोच का उदय हुआ, मनुष्य की सोच में पुनर्जागरण हुआ, इंटेलेक्ट जो था बौद्धिक रूप से सोच के रूप में मनुष्य ने विकास करना शुरू किया। नेक्स्ट, मनुष्य ने विकास करना शुरू किया, और जब मनुष्य ने विकास करना शुरू किया तो साइंस एंड फिलोसफी बीच में आ गई। There was a development of science and philosophy. Now we are going to talk about the Arabs and their contribution in the science, philosophy, as well as in the development of the human beings. Much of the writings of the Greeks and the Romans had been familiar to the monks and the clergymen through the Middle Ages, but they had not made this widely known. केवल ग्रीक और रोमन एम्पायर में जो भी कुछ डेवलपमेंट्स हुए थे वो they were confined to their own world that never came out. कुछ भी अगर पढ़ाई की बात होती है, कुछ लिटरेचर की बात होती है, लिटरेसी की बात होती है, that goes to different lands. अभी आज के डेट में कुछ भी डेवलपमेंट होगा तो वो फौरन इधर उधर फैल जाएगा, ठीक है। लेकिन उस समय ग्रीक एम्पायर की बातें वहीं पर रह जाती थी, रोमन एम्पायर की बातें वहीं पर रह जाती थी। ऑफ कोर्स ये हो सकता है कि मीन्स ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन वर नॉट देयर, बट in the 14th century, many scholars began to read translated works of the Greek writers like Plato, Aristotle. For this, they were indebted not to their own scholars, but to Arab translators. Yes. लेकिन 14वीं शताब्दी और उसके बाद कुछ ऐसे स्कॉलर्स हुए जिन्होंने की प्लेटो और एरिस्टोटल के काम को ट्रांसलेट किया, एंड द क्रेडिट गोज टू द अरब वर्ल्ड. That is the contribution of the Arab world to the rest